So hello everybody. We are going for another great session. Typically we speak about all things outbound, but this time we're going to speak about inbound because arguably inbound is still super important. And in some businesses, it's actually their main channel. And like in our business, actually inbound drives about 80% of our revenue right now. And so that means 20% of the revenue is about outbound. So inbound is very important for businesses. So even though we are in the outbound shop ourselves, inbound actually is what driving the majority of revenue, and that's also for some of the other companies out there, and for some of them it's 100%. So while outbound is definitely important and you have a lot more control on inbound, which is where there's a lot of volume and that needs to be all optimized. And that's why I had this idea back in the days, well, a few weeks ago, is to chat with Dom from a company called Self-Audit and discuss everything that has to do with inbound optimization. That means, leads, speed, process, how to think about stuff, how to optimize, how to ensure that, we're just not overhiring people, etc. And we have a, very strong process there. As everybody's tuning in from multiple places in the world, whether that's in the US, the West Coast, East Coast, Europe, it would be good to find out, guys, if you can just put it in the chat where you are tuning in from, first of all. You can tell us what's the weather like right now, whether you're on the beach or whatever. And the second thing, which would be interesting, is like, what's your title? Maybe are you head of growth? You're a founder. You're an agency. Who are you essentially? So that gives us a good understanding. What are your potential challenges, right? So we can maybe steer the conversation in a particular direction, right? To me, together with Dom. So feel free to put that in chat. If you're shy, you don't have to, but yeah, it would be good to have a good understanding. So brief intro. So Frank Sondors, I run a company called Forge, and we have other Forges, essentially multiple softwares where we help companies to build pipeline on outbound, and doing that with the least headcount possible. We do that currently using what's called cold email, which is a very typical channel, and we're about to soon also launch LinkedIn, doing that with AI agents, also without AI agents. And that's pretty much it. So we've been in business for a couple of years, have thousands of customers, and that's all really I want to say. Over to you, Dom. Would love to get an intro from you.
Yes, thanks, Frank. Appreciate it. Excited to be here today. And thanks to everybody joining in, taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. So I'm Dom Chiarenza, head of sales over at Self-Audit. What we are an inbound AI agentic solution for businesses of all sizes to automate their inbound processes. So you have a bunch of leads that you're not getting to them fast enough. We do a really good job of connecting it to CRM and getting to those leads really quickly, to like Frank mentioned. So over the next hour, just going to dive into some topics around that. Should you potentially go agentic, or should you go blended, or should you stay with what you're doing now? How we're going to leverage those different AI tools and how to make lives easier.
Makes sense. So agentic, I think as a category, just doesn't matter outbound, inbound, or whatever, exists for about like a year or two, right? Is that correct from an inbound standpoint? Would you say that's about right? It's quite new for most businesses as a topic, and leveraging agentic systems.
Yeah, okay. I think it's somewhat aligned with the whole ChatGPT explosion a couple of years ago, where now a lot of companies popped up with solutions from an agentic perspective, where you could think of it almost like a person that's not really a person. It's more of like an AI.
Gotcha. So I guess, when the main pain that you're generally addressing is there's a number of leads, and they just, they need to be processed probably like super fast. And really, it's to drive more pipeline or more conversion, more revenue ultimately from the inbound funnel, right? That's how Self-Audit just generally was born as a company.
That's just it, yeah. I couldn't say it better myself, especially in the B2C world, where speed to lead is paramount and crucial. We have some metrics that we're excited to share later. Why getting to those leads faster helps to get those sales through the door.
Yeah, so that's another interesting thing. Why I decided to have you, Dom, on here is because you also have insights not just on the world of B2B, but also on the world of B2C. And typically, whatever the stuff is happening in the world of B2C, a lot of folks are trying to learn from that, and also vice versa, right? So there's quite a few insights that you have. And guys, feel free to ask those insights. So if you want to have some insights specifically in the world of B2C or B2B, that Dom can also answer, right? So in our case, because we're an outbound kind of business. business, B2C is pretty much illegal on everything that has to do with outbound, but on the B2C front, naturally, that is all legal. Maybe on the B2C front, where do you see actually the biggest pool, if you could just ask? Is it like e-commerce, or what sort of companies are these?
Yeah, really anything.
Okay.
Auto, HVAC, a lot of business, maybe business consultants. It really runs the gamut, right? You'd imagine, Frank, the tens of thousands of types of companies there are. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm just wondering
yeah.
what would be the typical ones, because we don't necessarily deal with B2C, but it just would be interesting to understand. So when you kind of talk about the insights, that we're going to share in a bit, like what sort of companies would you be typically talking about? Because naturally there's also B2B companies, and maybe on the B2B front, is it like the typical like tech companies, SaaS companies, that you work with the most?
Yeah, I would say SaaS companies are big. A lot of, like I mentioned before, business type of consulting
Yep.
firms where that have some sort of SEO presence or have some sort of
Yep.
presence where there's a lot of Google searches or maybe even Facebook ads. But yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that, as we know, the internet is so broad, so things come from all over.
And really, that's because they have a ton of leads and they just need to efficiently process them, right?
Yeah, that's just it.
Okay.
Ultimately, we're not trying to replace salespeople here. We want to put salespeople in a position to be more successful when they are getting to those leads. Maybe help to automate some of that top of funnel. I've been part of sales teams now for almost 2 decades, and I've run sales teams, and I've seen the biggest challenges being at top of funnel. Do we get to people faster? What happens if something gets cold after a day? How do we follow up? So. And that's why I joined. I mean, I'm excited to help change some of those business problems and fix some things in the long run.
Nice. So guys, throughout the session, so we're gonna go into what I call the meaty part of the session, where we're gonna look at some stuff. At every moment when you feel like you want to ask a question, just drop the question into the chat. We either gonna take your question live, or we're gonna take your questions at the end. So Tom, without further ado, let's dive in.
Yeah,
And let's go through the few bits, and I may interrupt you at some points because I'm really
please.
curious. As I said, we are also huge when it comes to like inbound revenue. I'm very curious myself, what you have for us, but also naturally I'm trying to improve my business, but also I want other people to learn and improve their businesses so as well. So yeah, let's
Yeah,
go.
and Frank, to echo your point, we love questions. We want to keep this conversational. So absolutely. As we move forward through this presentation here, feel free to ask questions and clarifications and the like. But why don't we get started?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of building what we discussed, we figured we'd to start off this presentation, get some hard data behind the why. And there's a lot of stats on this slide, and a lot of them really just tell the same story. Speed to lead is the single biggest differentiator when it comes to inbound lead conversion. Let's start with the biggest one at the top there. Responding within 5 minutes makes you 100 times more likely to connect with that lead. 100 times. This brings me to when I bought a house a couple of years ago, and I've had various projects that I've needed. I'm not handy at all. I mean, I could put a nail into a wall. I could maybe flush a toilet, but I'm not really so good at handy stuff. So I rely on handymen and plumbers and stuff. And I recall a project with a floor. I needed a floor put in, because the floor in my basement wasn't good. I needed one put in. So I went through a portal, which allowed me to connect with multiple contractors. And I've done that a few times. It was for plumbing. One time was for maybe like a roof shingle replacement. And every single time, it was really the contractor that reached out to me, maybe first or second, that always got my business. There would be times where I'd have somebody on my roof fixing it, and I'd have a contractor reaching out saying, "Hey, I'm interested." I'm like, "Oh, sorry, man. Like it's been days ago." So that's just one idea where, from a B2C perspective, that speed to lead is just so crucial. I'm sure everybody on this webinar could also agree. Whoever gets there first.
Yeah, the way that I look at this problem is like, so I, everybody has competition, and I also have a ton of competition, and if I'm super fast, meaning I execute like an email or even a WhatsApp message or even phone call, whatever that is, right, within a minute or two, I'm really pushing down the lead, down the funnel, and I'm providing the sales support and the service, right, and people really enjoy having conversation with me or my team, and they also like the software. Even though they didn't manage to do their due diligence, on other vendors, they're happy to buy your stuff because they really like the speed, the speed and service and everything, right? Super, super quick. And you kind of have to think about, especially when you have a ton of, competitors in the space, it's like super important. It's a lot more important. The more competition you have, the more important it is the
Yeah.
speed, and executing everything literally within minutes. So yeah, I used to work as a VP sales in my previous gig, and I had literally SDRs calling within 5 minutes. We had an SLA of 5 minutes to call the leads, and we had reps working 24/7 around the clock because we were doing business, in the US, Australia, Europe, etc. And I was manning, the Slack channel. When the lead comes in, you literally call immediately. So it's super important. So no,
Frank,
it's
you should have called us. Kidding.
yeah, back then you didn't exist. That was like,
Yeah.
3 years ago.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
But like this is an example, like, and that's because, I back then when I was VP sales, I had like 20 competitors, and I knew my buyers like super savvy, right? And they would go and search on like G2, if you're in B2B, like go to G2 or like whatever, like on Google, like right now it's ChatGPT, what are the alternatives? Because they want to do due diligence. But if you're like super fast and you push them down the funnel and they really like what they're seeing, in a lot of cases, they would just go and buy. Especially, if it's like, if it's not like, an enterprise deal, they're happy to kind of progress even on the same day. So for us, kind of made sense back then. And yeah, I just typically think from a kind of how red is the ocean. So the more red it is, the more competitors you have, the more important this is. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think even from a buyer perspective, B2B, B2C, you tend to trust, or you would inherently trust a company or a person more if they reach out to you right away. And it's like, oh wow, this is the service that I'm going to get. You're reaching out this quickly, so it's such an onion that has so many layers to it outside of direct revenue. To your point, whether it's they're buying or whether it's enterprise, but yeah, and that kind of, so some of these other metrics here, I know at this point people have probably read all of them, but responding within 5 minutes, makes you 100 times more likely, like we talked about. 78% of shoppers, buy from the first company that responds, right? So that kind of ties into what I mentioned before. And again, look, this, whether it's enterprise or not, this is probably more B2C focused here, some of these metrics, but there is just an inherent advantage getting out to that customer first. And right now, Frank, I mean, I think we're at a point now where, not everybody's using AI. I mean, a lot of people we're still in the genesis of it, and still a lot of companies that are trying to figure things out. And you could think of it as, do you want to have a competitive advantage over your 15 or 16 competitors that maybe aren't doing this yet? So 90%.
It comes to mind when it comes to speed, right? So if you're being, on the B2B front, if you want to book, like a demo, in a lot of the buyers actually want to have the demo like right now, right? So that's just another. So so a lot of folks are on B2B, and if you can open your own calendar right now on your website, and if you don't have any availability for today, you are most likely losing leads. So you have to have some availability the same day, and that's another kind of way to look at why this whole thing is important. There are some people that need software now, whatever they want to buy, they need it like right now, and waiting for a demo to happen, whatever, something to happen, 2 days down the road is just not good enough today, because the expectation, people are used to like Amazon Prime, like all of this, stuff, being delivered like super fast, everything's happening super fast. So it increases the expectations, increase over time, what the users expect from any business out there. So it does definitely add the pressure to kind of execute faster. But the good stuff is, with all everything that happens on the LLM front, on the agentic front, you are able actually to deliver this, and that's why you guys.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And I think to echo your point there, I think the buying paradigm is just shifting, as we go through time. I think people, just to your point, immediate gratification, right? There's a reason why people still go to the mall. There's a reason why, despite the fact that we have Amazon and all these things, people want it right away. And you could see a tool that maybe you might be interested in today, but maybe in 3 hours, the shiny object is gone. So you have to really capitalize on that.
On the impulse buying.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a big impulse. I'm a big impulse buyer. So.
I was like, I sometimes I want to buy something, and like 30 minutes later, I was like, no, it's probably a bad decision. But if that company was fast enough, I would probably have purchased that thing. that expensive thing. There's sometimes expensive things that I want to buy, and 30 minutes later, it's like, nah, I'm not gonna buy
That's
it.
why I need to disconnect my credit card from Instagram, because I'm always scrolling through. Oh, that looks cool. That looks cool. And then there's more boxes coming to the front of my house, and my wife not so happy.
So impulse buying is another kind of thing. People on the B2C front, but also on the B2B front, there's impulse buying. People, they look at something, they're like, yeah, this is pretty cool, and they want to buy it. And if it's fast, they'll end up buying it. And if not, then they may forget about it. Whatever happens, they don't end up buying it, right? So that's what ultimately what we're missing out. So guys, it would be good to find out maybe in chat if you do track your speed, whatever you want to call that, SLA, etc. So speed, how fast are you processing your leads on average? It would be good to hear that in chat if you are tracking that. If you're not tracking that, that's fine. You don't have to say you're not tracking it. But yeah, it would be good to find out if somebody is tracking. On our end, our SLAs are actually 2 minutes. So that means within 2 minutes we have to execute something. So like right now we just execute an email, like a typical onboarding stuff. And then actually on top of that, we would just actually send a WhatsApp message. If we identify a number, we got a WhatsApp account, we'd execute the WhatsApp. And then we would typically see that, these like at least a couple touch points. You can also do like LinkedIn on the B2B front. You can connect on LinkedIn as well. And so like it's like, what do you do, when within that kind of specific time frame? I bet you're going to go into that as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, we have outside of these metrics, we have some other things. We have also a case study, but and I guess just the final point to wrap up this particular slide, which is just great. A lot of good information here. 7 out of 100 companies reply within 5 minutes. So there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of businesses out there to increase all of their closing rates. And I'm sure if there's people on this webinar right now that want to make more money, I mean, that should be the most the one thing that that we should look at. Frank, to your point, who's what does the response rates look like? We're responding right away. Do we have structured SLAs? Is it taking us a day? Is it taking us a week? So definitely good for everybody in general, not just on this webinar, to look to see what those metrics are. So we've broken down, I guess this kind of dovetails into what you were asking me before about the different sectors. And I think at this point, we've pretty much established here that speed matters. But how fast is fast enough? A car dealership is way different than financial services, which is way different than healthcare. So, what we have here are some optimal response times, and they really vary significantly, like we talked about. And let's break down some of these benchmarks here. So for industries like e-commerce and retail, really the expectation is immediate. We're talking less than a minute, which is crazy to think about, but new technologies like what we have help to make this type of thing possible. So like a virtual salesperson that can be on the floor 24/7, or maybe to your point, if I'm working for Frank and I have to respond within 2 minutes, that'd be great, right? So that having a super tight ship to follow up on things quickly, via chat or SMS. And that's why, you go on any.
Yeah, one of the things I do, and I think every business owner should do that. So listen carefully, guys. But essentially, you can go and check out your competitors and see how fast or how slow they are. And when you see that they're pretty slow, that kind of that should tell you that you should double down on speed. Particularly knowing that your competitors are always slow to respond. And the main thing actually that I do, just to kind of check that, I go to chat support on the website of my competitors. And just kind of type something in like a typical user, and I just tracking, how long does it take them. But in a lot of cases, actually, these also chat functions also tell you how fast do they typically respond. And then this is where you see it. It takes them typically 1 hour to respond, 2 hours to respond, or sometimes a day, and you're like, wow, damn. And that's an example. I mean, if you will be frustrated waiting for 2 hours, there's other hundreds and thousands of users that are frustrating waiting for that time frame. And then naturally you want to check your own timing as well. Maybe one question here, because you have different industries here. Do you have anything on like tech or SaaS in particular?
Yeah, nothing here on tech or SaaS, but just based off of my own experience, I think also, I mean, you're talking about 15, 30 minutes, because from your point before, think about at this point, most tech or SaaS are going to have a handful of competitors anyway. So it's just good to always be there. prior, even if it's a long, complex sales cycle of 8, 9, 10 months. Sometimes having that first initial, conversation, can help drive the sale through over the next couple of months.
Makes sense.
And then, kind of looking at more complex sectors like healthcare or finance, not maybe not as quick as a used car, or maybe like, booking a local service. Given the detailed response, might take longer, maybe because of compliance or complexity of the inquiry or something like that. Although instant acknowledgement, we would say, is an absolute must. Which again is also a perfect use case for an AI SDR, because it has that instant enriching experience versus a human, which might have to take a little bit of time. But really, just going down here, I think the key takeaway here is that hopefully this helps people understand ideal response times based on whatever industry you're in. Even if you're more B2B and you're selling to enterprises, this still applies, right? It doesn't really matter. Doesn't just because you're selling to
essentially based on all these verticals, it's within 15 minutes essentially. The healthcare and wellness, and then that's definitely an exception, right? So, but yeah, from all the rest of them, like 15 minutes, and it's kind of similar to also SaaS. But and I bet most of the folks in the audience right now just don't do that. So so yeah, I typically, whenever I meet other founders, heads of sales, I do ask them, hey, how fast are you on inbound? And typically the response is pretty disappointing. I actually don't know why, but like I don't know. I know why even though most heads of sales do know that speed is important, why they don't actually tackle it. Actually, in a lot of cases, they don't know it, which is why I ask folks in the audience, what is their speed to lead? So like just knowing how fast you actually respond is another thing, actually. So
yeah, I think especially in larger organizations where you have multiple levels of hierarchy under you. You have your CRO and you have VPs under you, then directors, and maybe a BDR might be, some of those metrics might be so far removed from what a CR is looking at anyway, where they assume it's fine. When you actually dig into it, you realize that, oh, wow, this lead sat here for 2 days. And that's really why we have that question on the bottom. It's something to just think about. How long did your last inbound lead wait? There's some folks on this call that could be selling $1 million solutions. Maybe that went to a competitor. We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
Great. So we'll go to the next slide here. So some bottlenecks that we could talk about, and the data is clear, right? Speed is critical. Why aren't more companies not doing it? And really, those bottlenecks is what we see depending on what the company is. And a lot of the bottlenecks tend to be human-centric, right? Human-centric limitations, and which AI is perfectly positioned to solve. So we'll talk about the founder bottleneck to start. Classic startup problem, classic maybe B2C type of problem, sometimes B2B. An inbound lead comes in, the founder's just too busy to respond quickly. They're too busy with the customer or selling on a pitch or whatever that comes out to. Every minute that passes by, like we talked about 2 slides ago, that the founder's delaying, is a potential deal lost or less likely that they're actually going to close something. And that could maybe potential that they're just that could signal maybe that they're not ready to scale. We see that from time to time. There could be an apprehension to maybe invest that's not there yet, or maybe just the revenue just isn't there yet to invest. But that would be something to look at in terms of a bottleneck if you're a single founder. So you decide to invest the money, you have an SDR team. Sometimes the bottleneck shifts to the SDR team, right? You try to solve the problem by hiring more SDRs, but this becomes a scale and cost issue, right? People are not, they're not cheap. You can't hire an SDR for every single time zone, cover leads that come in at 2 a.m. Then there's the issue of nurturing. SDR and salespeople, they're naturally focused on the hottest and newest leads, right? They're not going to necessarily, I speak with people all the time. Go ahead, Frank.
But I'm just thinking of some industries, or like depending on your average deal size, you can't even afford SDRs. Like I think in the first place, there's also that thing, right? So, and I think the other problem is like I don't know whether you're B2C or doesn't matter B2B, but you have people buying from different parts of the world, right?
Yep.
Like US, Australia, Europe, right? So that is not a thing. Like, so are you gonna have 2 shifts, or what? Like, how does that look like, right?
Correct.
So it becomes, suddenly you need to have, people working around the clock. Like, I had the same case. And so, yeah, global business in particular, I think they're the ones that end up hiring more and more individuals, because yeah, if you don't staff um, the inbound front, people, whenever your customers are active, then you're not actually losing. But like, you know, to keep on increasing humans, for different time zones, and the cost racks up quite quickly. So that's exactly what we had back in the days.
Yeah, and Frank, that it's more common than you think. I mean, I speak with so many folks on a weekly basis that have essentially no coverage, for like 12, 13 hours a day. And some of them are even international. So it's kind of almost like they think of it as a necessary evil type of thing, where it's too expensive to cover parts of the world, to cover some time zones.
Yeah.
Or even, like we talked about before, the impulsive buyer. Maybe you happen to be scrolling on your phone at 11:30 p.m. Why can't I get a response then? Why would I have to wait till the next morning when I forgot what I was even doing the night before?
Yeah. Yeah.
So really, all the bottlenecks just lead to one problem. The top of funnel conversion becomes less efficient as volume grows. So the more leads you get, as a rule, if you're not adding in more enablement, the worse your response time would theoretically get. So it's a vicious cycle, right? So like more leads actually hurt your ability to convert them, which is wild to think about. You invest so much in marketing, you invest in people, and the more you have, if you don't have the right tools, you can't convert them. And the cost is staggering. It's a direct hit to everything. It's your marketing dollars become more inefficient. Your salespeople miss targets. I mean, you're talking about, it's almost like too much of a good thing is not a good thing, almost, right? You all these leads and you can't and you can't hit them. So but we're not blaming people, right? I'm not saying, you stink, you're not closing deals. It's just the system's flawed. There's things that could be better. The solution is to work harder. It's to work smarter. Think of it, this might be a reach, but it's almost like the AI, revolution is like maybe 100 years ago, when people used to use horses to carry or things for hundreds of miles, but then cars came up and trains came up. So it's not a horse problem. It's the horse is doing all they can, but there's just better technology that could do things more efficiently. And really the solution, like horses 100 years ago, or maybe even now 150 years ago, whatever it is, it's not to remove them, but to help augment and work smarter, not harder, like I mentioned. So those AI powered systems can help provide that instant, intelligent engagement every single time, which we'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide. So Frank and I, now it's been almost half an hour. We have had a really good conversation about inbound, different verticals, why it's important, speed to lead. And I thought this would be a really fun little, I guess, work. I don't want to say experiment, but I can't think of the word right now. For everybody on the call, exercise. There we go. Fun little exercise for everybody on the call here to go through. Should I even automate? Is this something that that you should do? So the first thing, is it taking you more than 5 minutes to reply? The second, are there fewer than 5 to 12 follow-ups? Are your salespeople just going for the next shiny object? Is there no lead scoring gate? Are you just essentially letting everything go through, and are your salespeople working on things that maybe don't matter or maybe aren't really qualified? Are shoppers or people that are potential customers or partners, are they waiting more than 10 minutes? Like we talked about before, almost 80% buy from the first responder. Do you have a system in place with manual routing and handoffs? Or is it manual routing and handoffs, right? Does it taking time? And finally, are leads going untouched? Do you have a Go High Level or Salesforce or a HubSpot, and can you run a report and see that there's dozens and dozens, sometimes, God forbid, hundreds of leads that were never touched? Is that a reality for you? So we'll give you guys another couple seconds here to count up how many of these that you're going through, and then we could maybe go through what these scores mean.
Yeah, I'm just going through them myself. Luckily for most of the stuff is pretty good. I still don't have reps working 24/7 for sure. most of our business does come, from specific regions right now.
Sure.
Um, and yeah, I mean, naturally, as the business grows, like in our case, right, as our business grows, you will bump into kind of these issues, like, so the first one being, reply right over 5 times. So I do expect I will have issues as I kind of progress, even though I have a few automations running and stuff like that. But some of them do rely still, like, on what I call the augmentation kind of side of things. So we still have humans also on the inbound front. So gonna give you kind of, one thing that kind of we're thinking of, so we like, our customers can call us, can call the sales rep,
Yep.
right, like live on the site right now even. Naturally humans go to bed and then you can't call them, right? So there's definitely missed opportunity. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, kind of back of my head, that I do get leads around the clock, but I'm not always there. My team is not always there to service them. Even though, yeah, you can write to us, whatever, but like, I always wish that there would be, the agentic system that would, kind of cater for, the moments when humans are not around, right? So that you don't have this sort of leaky bucket, right? So, yeah, because we are advertising as well. And right now we're advertising, during specific time frames. So we are spending money, paid media,
Sure.
stuff like that. We're advertising your specific time frame when the humans are actually around, and then when they're not around, we actually switch off the ads. So,
Yeah, we see that a lot too. Yeah.
and I want to run the ads around the clock, but then I don't have the humans around the clock. That's the problem, right? That's the problem that I have personally right now. And again, like, I think this is not just me. This is, thousands and millions of businesses out there
Of course.
that also get business outside of the typical working hours,
It,
and they're
it
not
is.
serving that business.
It is very common. Sorry for cutting off there. Were you still saying something? I apologize.
No. That's
Okay.
just saying that, I wish I would be running 24/7. The
Yeah.
business.
Yeah, it's and the technology exists, luckily, right? There's agentic tools that are very close to human, that essentially, start that customer journey on the right foot, by being agentic and having conversations. And we see that all the time. You're not the only one. We see a lot of people, a lot of business owners, small and large, that turn off ads after a certain time or during a certain period, because people are off, right? End of year, people are all off. You're not going to get the same returns. So,
Do you see any differences, by the way? One question, because that definitely applies in B2B, and I think there's also differences in B2C. Do you see differences between desktop and mobile?
in respect to what?
Um, I guess like response times, or like how people, like, that they're struggling on mobile, for example. So I'll give you an example. So we're in B2B, right? And when a user comes to our website on mobile, I actually don't expect them to even sign up to my software. Reason being is our software is not even optimized for mobile, and it's not meant to be used on a mobile device. And what a lot of companies actually do in that case is they actually block the mobile experience in full, because they know that the software is not optimized for mobile. So when they detect that that the user comes from a mobile device and is trying to sign up to a software, it tells them, please check out the software on desktop. Naturally, on B2C, the mobile experience is more optimized, but I'm just curious, do you see any differences between devices when it comes to inbound?
Yeah, that's a really insightful question. I'd have to think about that. But this is completely unrelated. And that's why I use an Android, not iOS, because I could press desktop site and I could actually view desktop, desktop version, get around all those.
Yes, I am using an Android. Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Two Android. We're probably the only ones on the call here. But yeah, no, I think a lot of organizations that are looking for that speed to lead do have a mobile optimized website. I just think it's crucial, especially having a web chat that's right there. But to your point, yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think of any desktop versus mobile, but I think mobile is just incredibly important, because especially, depending on who your customer is,
but I'm always thinking I'm losing money, like in B2B world, right? And I think other businesses are also losing money. And so this is why, I was thinking to myself, is there something that is being just done differently, or like the mobile lens is looked at differently potentially? Whether that's when it comes to speed is, let's say maybe speed is more important on mobile. I just wasn't sure because I remember when I used to work at Google, like 10 years ago, and like mobile and speed, like everything is super important. And I'm just curious how it has, I guess, changed when it comes to all the data today and kind of agentic systems kind of there maybe. But yeah, like today, like we literally barely make any money on mobile because, yeah, I mean the user does not, can't use the software, so naturally they're not going to use that. So I'm thinking in my head, how do I actually monetize the mobile traffic effectively? So that's like another leaky bucket kind of, in my head that I still, for example, haven't solved, right? So
Yeah. And just kind of, I guess, double clicking on that. I mean, I think the behavior and intent of a mobile versus a desktop user is just going to be markedly different.
yeah,
Whereas on mobile, maybe intent is at its peak, but
yeah,
attention span is at the lowest versus desktop. They're more likely in a research phase or evaluation phase. So, that's, you bring up such a great point. Where do you, do you serve a different experience for mobile versus desktop,
yeah.
depending on the type of
I
person that
mean,
might
I
be.
would love to convert my users mobile somehow, collect, I would say collect the bacon mobile, but like I know it's not possible because it's just, the software doesn't work on mobile, right? So like, how do you
Yeah.
do that? So I haven't figured out, what is the, what should I do in mobile? What should be the speed? How do I respond? What do I do? I have a ton of mobile traffic. It's just that there's like zero revenue associated to the mobile traffic. So, but yeah, people probably researching, etc. I just was curious, what do you do in that case? But yeah.
We might have stumbled on our next webinar topic. Look at that, Frank.
Yeah, how do you 10x your revenue on mobile traffic? Everybody has mobile traffic, and so
Oh
that's
yeah.
that's why I'm just curious enough. So, yeah.
No, 100%. That's insightful. Thank you. So yeah, we were on that slide, and at this point, I think all of us have some sort of numerical score, based off some of those business issues before, and so if you scored a 0 to 2, yeah, I think that's good news that you might not need to necessarily bring on agentic technology. Your focus should potentially stay on staying manual, and just tighten up the playbooks. Can you get reply time from 5 minutes to 3? Your job as a business owner is just optimize the human powered system you have, and maybe just use some basic automation tools, maybe not so much agentic. But if I were to guess, besides you, Frank, of course, you're a very savvy, business owner.
I'm in the first bucket, so
There
that's,
we go. You're probably
I have 1 point, I think, so
you're proving us wrong here, but I'm totally kidding. But I think the reality is most of us are going to fall in the 3 to 6.
yes,
Which could potentially be a signal that the current approach is just not scalable and actively costing you conversion and revenue. And I think your job is just to stop trying to perfect a broken system, and instead of turning off ad spend and thinking about adding people in different time zones, and maybe think about potentially piloting a blended model. And when we say blended, we mean a mix of agentic AI and humans. Because again, we're not trying to remove humans from the equation. I hope not. I'm in sales. I don't want to be replaced. But blended is where you strategically combine the best of both worlds. The speed and the consistency and the scalability of an AI SDR with the emotional intelligence and nuance of a human sales team. Nothing beats a human interaction. But if we could capitalize on that sooner, it's not we're not trying to replace SDRs. I can't reiterate that enough. But we really want to empower them to be more effective and focus on what's more important, building the relationships and closing deals. These past couple of years, Frank, have been crazy because this is a complete fundamental shift in how we think about the sales funnel. Completely different. If we had a conversation 5 years ago where I told you can scale at a relatively fixed cost, you'd ask me if I've been taking my medication lately, right? But it's not a lot. We're not letting the machine. We're letting the machines do what they're good at, and we're letting humans do what they're good at. So,
yeah, I totally agree with you. So that's something similar that we preach on the outbound front as well. Because you just can't remove the humans in full. But what you want to do is help every business to reduce the pressure to hire more headcount, right? So through the blend, right? But you still need to have humans in the loop for various different reasons. So that is not going away. But what we are seeing, I think, all across the world, doesn't matter whether you're in the Bay Area or you're somewhere in Europe or Asia, whatever, you are seeing leaner and meaner teams, and that's exactly due to the tech that you guys have, because it's not anymore growth at all costs. It's about running profitable businesses these days, unless you are like a pure AI LLM like OpenAI. That's maybe a slightly different category, right? So they raise a ton of money all the time, and they can keep on burning. But businesses today are typically, also if you're VC backed, that typically are being asked to become significantly more profitable and efficient, and it is possible due to all the new tech that's available in the market. And actually, I also see a lot of companies these days, when they use agentic systems, both on inbound and outbound, they actually don't even raise money. They don't need to raise money. So we also see that behavior, that there's less need on to raise VC money, actually to accelerate the business, because they are able to just run significantly more capital efficient business. And that's because they do have agentic systems baked into the systems. And so
Yeah, and I think that just lends itself to potential changes in the VC model, and everything it just cascades.
Yeah, like the other way I look at it, so it's not just about sales, but just generally in your business. So let's say when I have a problem, I typically just think about, how do I solve the problem from agentic lens? So sort of agent first, like human second. Like I always think about, if I can get an off-the-shelf solution, an agentic solution, and plug that in and drive output from that like relatively fast, like this is the best course of action. If for some reason the software doesn't exist in the market, then yes, I will go down what I call the human path. But I always, like today, I highly advise everybody, think about implementing agentic system first, and then think about actually hiring humans as the kind of the next step. Because a lot of cases I also see people hire humans and they forget even to implement the agentic system. So
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, it's that, and again, that just kind of ties off this idea that right now we're at the point where the machines are not going to take over our lives; they're just going to help us do a better job.
Yeah, I also tell other folks, just this also will help you to avoid having layoffs in your business as well, right? So because ultimately you don't want to have that, and that's why you want to make sure you have these systems in place. Yeah,
100%.
Awesome.
Yeah, why don't we look at a case study? So this is a Sales Ape customer, active reality. So theory, we've been talking about theory this whole time. Let's actually get into a real world example here. So they do a really good job with the blended model, demonstrating the kind of results you can achieve when you prioritize conversion over time saving. So active reality is in the VR fitness and leisure space. Their challenge was that, when a prospect was on their website and filled out a form, their staff was often busy, like running a session or something along those lines, cleaning, whatever it could be. And this created an enormous inbound bottleneck, like we talked about before, tons of leads, wasting money on them. Leads were sometimes waiting for hours. They had no quick way to tell which leads are serious about, booking a large corporate event. So there's just a lot of stuff going on. And it wasn't really just about saving time. This is actually a direct hit on the bottom line. So they implemented Sales-Ape. They trained the AI on past successful conversations. Then they plugged it into their website and in their email channels. And the ROI was pretty quick. Over a 30-day period, they tuned the AI. They refined the responses and some of the qualifying questions. Now, given this is an open AI backbone, and so it's able to answer questions on its own, but to further refine and further make it personalized is only better. And then if you want to take a look at some of these results here, over 200% sales converted. So tripling their sales from inbound leads has happened because every single lead was just engaged instantly, right? 30% of conversion rate. So there's a really direct measure on the efficiency. The 60-second reply rate, which the first slide would be very proud to see that, right? Because now the reply rate was much faster versus what it was before. And the ROI is you really can't argue with that, 10x. The investment. So if the AI cost $1, the AI made $10 for every dollar spent. So it just really wasn't a minor efficiency gain. This is a fundamental driver of revenue for them. And they expanded. They were able to actually expand. From one to 12 locations, and they didn't have to hire all these different SDRs. They continue to manage the AI SDRs and.
Yeah, so kind of, I'm starting to think about kind of few software businesses that I know. So like the tiniest software businesses, and they only have account execs. They don't even have SDRs. And actually, account execs, so AEs, they are frequently in demos, etc. So when they are in demos, they're not looking after folks that are on the side, on chat, etc. Or so that's kind of, there are also parallels there. And yeah. So I'm kind of thinking about the B2B kind of world there as well, where you're doing something, spending time with customers, and but you don't have time to spend time with new leads coming in, like right now, like hot, sitting there. So yeah.
I've seen it before in the B2B world as well. Yeah, I mean, you might have a lean team. Maybe somebody, one person's on vacation, one person's traveling to a client, one person's filling out an RFP. The other person is, in a demo and prepping. 3 hours pass, that's going to your competitor. You're done.
But also like very simple things like, when the lunchtime hits, so everybody goes for lunch for an hour. So nobody's around for an hour. But guess what? He's gonna stop. That's just, that's just one example I have for everybody. Guys, what happens when everybody goes for lunch? Do we take lunch different times? So like, I mean, people do want to have lunch together, but then, who's looking after leads? There's leads coming nonstop. So you don't stop, when you just go for lunch. Like, what do you do in that case? Even then, like, silly examples like that. But it is true. I also think about when somebody goes for lunch or whatever, they go somewhere, like, who's looking after this stuff? Yeah.
It's interesting. What was that, Frank?
I get really annoyed as a former VP sales right now as a CEO. I get really annoyed, like even like these moments, like for an hour, like, there's nobody around. And then I'm asking, so guys, what do you think is happening? Like, the people waiting on chat, like, who's looking after them? Nobody. I was like, well, don't you think we're losing them?
Yeah, no.
It's
a very common frustration. It's this lunch. It's before 9 a.m. It's during a holiday. It's just so many different things.
Yeah, but the other thing I think that people are not thinking about is it also reduces friction internally. Like, there's definitely friction when there's inefficiencies. You're actually reducing these friction moments between different people. Why stuff is not get done. Right, you do feel like the business is a lot more efficient when these sort of systems are in play. So again, I used to remember my times back at Google where everything was automated, everything was running. It was super efficient. And then I joined another business which was not very efficient, and there was a ton of friction between the two humans and sales, stuff like that. So yeah, you just also have you're also able naturally. Okay, it's kind of from a sales standpoint, in your sales, because you get more leads, you're also able to hit your targets, as a rep. You're much easier to, it's much easier for you to hit targets, when you have these systems implemented as well. So it's actually also beneficial for the single rep to ensure that they have these systems in place. It actually benefits them. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think it also, it eliminates things like cherry picking and maybe some other things. Maybe I've seen where sometimes an AE has been at a company for a very long time and knows the system better than a newer one, and they know where to get the latest inbound leads from. Where going agentic, if it all goes through the bot and then it just all goes to bot, and goes to the agent, and then it all goes into a round robin, at once it's qualified, it kind of democratizes things a bit too. So.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally.
So, good point. Keep going in there. I know we're 12 minutes left. Just a couple more slides. Loving this conversation so far, Frank. Thank you. So when we talk about a blended workflow, we kind of teased what that was before, but how does it actually work? So this slide visualizes the blended workflow we've been talking about. The step-by-step process that turns an inbound lead into a high intent qualified prospect without a human ever having to touch a cold lead again. So the first step is the AI intercepts. This happens instantly, the moment a lead comes in 24/7, and this is where you get your sub 60-second response time every time. So people are at lunch, it's a holiday, it doesn't really matter. It's going to get hit. Next, the AI's job is to enrich and score the lead. So it's going to potentially pull in publicly available data, can combine it with information the prospect gives. It's going to score against your predefined criteria, and then give some sort of score. Is this lead good enough to pass through or not? And this is critical, right? Because now we're not going to be wasting your team's time on leads that aren't a good fit. So we could push them to maybe do more research on the website. We could push them maybe to like a lower intent purchase before we actually get our very expensive salespeople involved. We want to optimize their time.
One question I have for you on step two, because I get this question a lot with multiple folks. Do you enrich with any sort of intense signals and like anything like that?
You can, yeah, it's possible you can.
Okay,
A lot of it is more than likely you're going to be using the data given from the prospect themselves to enrich
gotcha.
and figure out whether or not they're a good fit. But things
Mhm.
like play and stuff, it's all possible.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um, and then you can ask 3-4 tailored questions. I mean, we see on average of six back and forths until we can figure out if somebody's qualified or not. Sometimes it's 2.
Mhm.
And every business is different. Do you want to be more sympathetic? Do you want to be more empathetic? Do you want to be more to the point? Do you want to be informational? Every business is different. And that's why I think having a tailored agent is important, because it's not one size fits all. And the questions are designed to move the conversation forward, right? We're being very intelligent about it. We want to move things forward. We want people to book. We're not just trying to, gather data. We're not a research firm. We're here trying to make money.
Yeah. So
Um,
what are the typical goals then that you set in place? So like, booking a meeting, what are the other goals that the agent could achieve?
So booking a meeting is a big one. Sometimes we speak with folks that have kind of maybe like a low ticket item, or maybe
Yeah.
like an item that's easily, people
Yeah.
come to the website, they know they want to buy it, so we could drive those consumers to a purchase as well.
Hmm. Okay. Makes sense.
From the first part, you can have the agent send a message internally, say, hey, this person needs to be followed up with, or it could go, like I mentioned before, it's a cleaner way to go through a round robin software,
Mhm.
whether most CRMs do that. And then, like I said, it keeps it even. But so once a lead is qualified and meets the criteria, like we just talked about,
Mhm.
all those high intent inquiries go right onto the calendars. So it's the perfect handoff. And if your agent is good, all of those notes and stuff should be in the CRM. So when your closer gets that meeting, they're going to know exactly what was spoken about.
Mhm.
They're not only doing research about the industry, about the company, about the person. They have the research. There could be really good nuggets that was in that conversation, so that your salesperson is coming in and they're essentially ready to build a good solid foundation with that prospect.
Mhm. Makes sense.
And you're automating the repetitive stuff, and you're getting rid of the human element where sometimes people are not following up with things.
Mhm.
And
So just to kind of just recap, so the agent will keep on following with the lead until that goal has been achieved.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay,
yeah,
makes sense.
yes.
How many roughly follow-ups does it take? Like 2, 3? Like, is there any data on that you have?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, so the average is 5 to 6.
5 to 6. Okay,
Um,
wow.
yeah,
That's quite a bit actually, I would say, especially for inbound. I'm just thinking.
it
Uh,
is. But the reason why is because we want it to be conversational.
yeah.
Hey, how are you? That's a relay, right? Oh, tell
Yeah.
me what you're looking for. That's a relay. And then it's sales 101. You're not going to close till you learn about them. And I get we're not closing business with an AI, agent. We're just closing a meeting, but still,
Yeah.
you're more than likely to get somebody to book a meeting when they feel like they're listened to and they feel like they've actually had a human interaction.
Mhm. Makes sense.
Yep. And then we're getting to the end here, so I'll try to speed this up a little bit because I know we're short on time.
Mhm.
So to some of these guardrails and risk mitigation, because you're thinking, this all sounds great, but what about the risks? What if the AI says something wrong? What about brand consistency, compliance? So these are all valid and important questions. The good news is that the best AI SDR solutions are built with these risks in mind. They do have specific guardrails to mitigate them. And so first and foremost, you need to establish that tone brand style guide. So which is translated into a prompt library for the AI, ensures that every interaction is on brand, consistent, on point. So you're not kind of saying things that somebody in your company, wouldn't necessarily say. GDPR for some countries means more than others, but sometimes you need to consider that in data residency.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's non-negotiable, especially for some industries like finance, healthcare, or whatever. So the AI solution needs to be compliant with local and international law.
Mhm.
You need to set up escalation triggers, right? So this is like a built-in safety net. So if a prospect asks about a very specific topic, or they get frustrated and say, like, I need to speak with somebody right now, the AI should just immediately cut off and then just give
Mhm.
it over to a person.
Yeah.
And the AI should know when it's time to bring in an expert.
Mhm.
And then, this really brings us to a really interesting and important shift where, SDRs are almost reskilled as prompt wranglers, right? In addition to being, maybe reskilled as closers too, right? Maybe both. But, the fear that AI is going to replace SDRs is a misconception. Nobody's trying to do that. We're just trying to redefine the role. It's just different, different times and different skill sets. Become strategic thinkers to train AI, monitor performance, step in to handle high value, complex conversations. It's a more fulfilling, potentially more fulfilling, higher impact role versus following up on the same 200 leads every month, and a direct path to higher conversion rates. So some of these guardrails are just in place to really help you implement that new tool, help you build that reliable, scalable compliance system that's going to drive more conversions and help you sleep good at night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree.
Yep. So I guess we're just about to wrap up, but I wanted to just kind of leave you this roadmap for success. It's just not enough to just implement an AI SDR solution. You need to measure the things to make sure it's ensuring and delivering value. So this whole time we've had this great conversation on conversion and numbers and speed, but we should take a look at these metrics that actually matter. The first is the sales converted or bookings won. So this is the ultimate bottom line number. Are you actually generating more revenue? The AI shouldn't be looked at as a cost center, but more like a revenue driver. Conversion rate from inquiry to looks we have some British spelling there, but inquiry to booking purchase. Direct measure of your funnel's efficiency. So the goal of AI timing is to move this number up, month over month. The third key, and forgive me for talking super fast, but I want to make sure we get through this, is the SLAs, the reply times. Frank, you mentioned that you're great at it. Some people probably aren't as good, but this is really the foundation of everything we've talked about, right? This number should be tracked religiously. The faster you are, the higher your conversion rate will be. And then other things like pipeline velocity, how many days does it take to go from lead to inquiry to close deal? That will go up inherently when that wait time goes down. And then finally, human and AI touches. And your team utilization. So this is the metric that's going to bring everything together, right? What percentage of your SDR's team is spent on high value stuff versus low value stuff? You should see a significant shift, with your team spending more time in meaningful interactions and less time in those follow-ups. And that right there would be the proof that the blended model is working. People are spending more money on high value activities, money's coming in, less touches from a human perspective, yet, sales are not going down. So this is really things to focus on, so you can consistently rely on AI to bring the ROI that the salespeople that sold it to you promised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, I would the only one thing I would also kind of double down here is just to calculate how you look at ROI of kind of human only approach and then human plus agentic approach. I would definitely highly advise to kind of look at those two lenses in your business, and it should be obvious to most businesses that why you should be blending, right? So just kind of coming out of time here. Didn't manage to kind of touch on the questions because we're also running out of time.
Yeah.
But because so if folks want to ask any questions to Dom, where's the best place to kind of find more about what you do and how you do it, etc.? Is that on LinkedIn? Is that on X? So where are you hanging out?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I think really the best thing to do, obviously add me on LinkedIn. We'd love to meet all of you and have conversations, but would love for all of you, anybody, to just try the agent for free. Just go to our website, salesape.ai. You can scan the QR code there as well. Put in your email address, and that's it. And you'll see, emulate what it's like to be followed up with a company.
I did that already, actually. So
look at that.
It's really good. It's really good. Yeah. So that's why I highly advise to always play around. It's pretty cool, actually. You can kind of start chatting, kind of start testing. Pushing the limits to see where they can answer a few of the questions. It is really good. So yeah, it's well trained there. So likewise, guys, if you have any questions on whatever it is that you want to ask on the world of outbound, feel free to find me on LinkedIn or Salesforce.ai. So this may have not been the last webinar. Next one maybe we're going to talk about mobile, whatever is the next agentic kind of wave. So thank you so much, Dom. Thanks for being here. And guys, if you got any questions, because we didn't manage to touch on the questions, do feel free to ping Dom on all the inbound front, or do go to the website salesape.ai. You just scan the QR code. Cheerio.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.